It's Thursday, April 30th. My name is Juan Brown. You're watching the BLANCOLIRIO channel. And yesterday, the 29th of April, we learned that the Waco Aircraft Company has closed its doors via an email to the 60 employees there in Battle Creek, Michigan. But nobody's explaining why they closed or what happened to Waco. Now we'll tell you the rest of the story. This is my Waco YMF-5, November 880 Whiskey Papa, serial number 88, a 1999 model YMF-5, the newest airplane I've ever owned. It's got about 600 hours total time and less than 200 hours on a Pete Jones overhaul on the 300 horsepower Jacobs radial engine. Just been a delightful airplane to own and operate. We use it primarily for scholarship rides. This is the ultimate ambassador to aviation sort of airplane. When you show up at the airfield with one of these, everybody's going to take a look. And the neat thing about what these aircraft are designed for, let me show you over here, is this front cockpit. Of course, you fly the aircraft from the rear cockpit. Here's all the controls are in there. But this front cockpit not only has a door, but it's got room for two passengers. And that's the whole idea of this thing, is a ride-hopping, barnstorming airplane. And so we do scholarship rides with this several times a year and raise money for aviation scholarships here locally. And it's perfect for that mission. A little brief history on the Waco. Yes, it's pronounced Waco, like taco. Waco is a small town in Texas. We ain't coming out. That's another story. The original Waco company was, they were named Waco after the Weaver Aircraft Company. Started in the 1920s, and by the late 20s, they were the most popular biplane out there on the market, as it was a superior product. It's a Cadillac, smooth flying airplane compared to all the other biplanes that were out there at the time. And they came in a bewildering array of makes and models. And they lasted until 1947, like most all the other light plane manufacturers. After the post-war pilot surge never showed up and everybody overproduced, they went out of business in 1947. Then around 1986, they got production rights to build a new version of the Waco, and they built this new version, the YMF-5, loosely based off pretty more than loosely based. It was closely based off of the original YMF-5 model, but changed quite a bit and modernized a bit as well. Around 2011, the Waco Aircraft Company picked up the rights and began recreating the famous Great Lakes biplane, the 2T-1A, a smaller two-seat tandem biplane designed with a Lycoming AEIO 360 engine in it. And working out of a small facility, maybe two 60 by 60 hangars, Waco would produce maybe 4 or so of these YMF-5s in a good year and a handful of the Great Lakes biplanes. Towards the end of the production line here, the aircraft manufacturing, they were down to building perhaps one of these YMF-5s each year. With 5,000 man-hours of labor and all the additional costs, the cost of a new YMF today is over $680,000. When this one was built in 1999, it was about $250,000. And of course, they were considered very expensive at that time also. And the cool thing about Wacos is they tend to hold their value minus inflation. This thing sold for $250,000 brand new back in 99, and it's still valued at about $250,000 today in 2026 dollars. Now, in 2018, my friend Peter Bowers was running the Waco company at the time, sold the company to Dieter of the Dymor Corporation or Company. Dieter from Germany was from the luggage industry. He built some very fancy designer type luggage and had a boatload of money, and the typical Howard Hughes classic aviation story, decided to blow a bunch of money on airplanes. And so he bought the Waco Corporation, fell in love, like all the rest of us, with the design of this thing, and then proceeded over the last 8 years or so here, pouring a fortune into the production facility in Battle Creek, Michigan. I'm hearing numbers as high as $40 million and above to build this beautiful campus of where they built these aircraft, and a big giant restaurant and cafe and a real Taj Mahal production facility, all to produce one aircraft per year. Well, the economics of that obviously are not going to add up. Dieter got his management friends from Germany in there to try to sell these things, and they pumped up the looks of the advertising and the huge tents at Oshkosh and Sun and Fun. We just had a blast meeting everybody at Sun and Fun a couple of weeks ago. Had no idea about this closure coming, but it just didn't work out. And finally, Dieter's tired of blowing all this money on an aircraft company that's producing one aircraft a year, because it's a tiny niche market that you're going to sell these airplanes to anyways, and has decided to stop the bleeding and stop the production of the aircraft. Now, while they're only putting out one or two of these YMFs out each year, they were continuing to put out the Great Lakes biplane. Those have been selling fairly well. And then Dieter got the idea to start producing this thing called a Junkers J50, a Junkers design from the 1920s, Rotax-powered corrugated aluminum design that never took off here in the United States. And that cost another fortune's worth of money that never took off. So this really has nothing to do with the economy, the U.S. economy. This is about management decisions, and those of us that fall in love with aviation and can tend to easily blow a little too much money on an airplane or a whole manufacturing plant of airplanes. So where does that leave all us that own these aircraft at this time? Well, there's going to be a group of folks that are going to come together and work out a way of acquiring the parts to this aircraft to be able to get them back onto the market again one way or another. Since each of these aircraft are hand-built, it doesn't take much to recreate any of the parts for this aircraft. I was lucky to buy the last of the two fuel sight gauges and just got them installed yesterday. They still have 11 of those sight gauges in stock, and then at some point somebody else is going to have to pick up the manufacturing of those. One of the hardest parts to recreate is this cowling, so you're going to need to get the jigs for this cowling if you want to build new cowlings. The rest of this is all pretty well hand built. A jig for the fuselage, and a lot of these fancy fairings nowadays, which were aluminum on this one, are now fiberglass, like this fiberglass piece here. And so that's not a huge deal to recreate. But anyways, there will be a group of folks that get together and revive the parts availability for the Waco series of aircraft. You just can't kill a good airplane. And at this time, the company is not going bankrupt, so it's not going through a bankruptcy or debtor in possession or any of that sort of thing. So it should be able to be resolved, the parts availability. And then finally, if the parts become unavailable and the manufacturer is no longer manufacturing, there's a FAA advisory circular that does allow you to build your own parts for your own airplane to the original specifications and keep your aircraft a certified aircraft. So just a classic aviation tale. A guy with a lot of money and maybe not a lot of airplane experience moves in and blows a ton of money on a dream that doesn't quite pan out, and then eventually runs the whole thing into the ground and ends up shutting it down. And that leaves 60 folks out of Battle Creek, Michigan, out of a job as of today. We'll see what the future brings here soon. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. We're going to keep flying these things and enjoying them. See you here.